Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman, and you're listening to us on AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer. What day is this? Is this Thursday?
I think so.
Well, Thursday. What a week. Well, this morning, my eldest sister, who's significantly older than I am, 74, passed away. Had been suffering from dementia for the past year or so, pretty early to get it. And so I got the call this morning about that. I haven't had time to process it, but I'm here on the air, and that helps me process things. But what I want to say, I think it was Spurgeon who said, "Be often where men die." You know, there's something about death that really wakes you up to the reality of life. You realize how short it is, how precious it is. I don't want to be trite about this. Well, more than anything, what are we doing with our lives? And that's really relevant right now because we're in election season. You have your ballot. Just found out, from George Barna, the Christian pollster last week, that half the Christians in the country aren't even planning to vote. It's been pretty obvious that most of the functions of this country that are supposed to be under we the people aren't functioning because we're not functioning, because we're not stepping in. We're expecting someone else. It's really funny. We all want a Messiah. We don't want the Messiah because the cost of that is too high. But we want someone to come in and save us. We want someone to come in and do the hard work in our families, in our communities, everywhere. And that's natural and that's normal. But when you look around and you realize that it's just you and maybe a handful of people, and we knew that. The American Revolution was what? It was like 3% or something that were into it. That's history, folks. That's what we're living in. Now, that's what we've always been living in. There's very, very few people that actually step up, but I hope that you're going to be one of them. And I'm trying to be one of them here on the radio, with the voter guide, in my family, in my congregation, in my community. But I got to tell you, I'd really appreciate if more of you would break through the passivity. I appreciate that you're awake, because you probably wouldn't be listening to this show if you weren't. You're awake, but there's so many people that are awake, but they're not doing anything. And I don't understand. I don't have that kind of mindset. I do too much, actually. And then I drive the people around me crazy because I expect maybe too much of them. I don't know. But I know that we can all be doing something more than we're currently doing, especially now, especially during the election. And so throughout these weeks leading up to the election, every day on the Peak is election day because we're covering that in some way, shape, or form. And today's program I'm doing as a tribute to my sister, Laurie Beth Goldman, who was my big sister, was headed off to college the fall after I was born. She's 17 years older than I am, and haven't had time to process. I know I miss her. I'm heading back to Philadelphia, where I'm from, for the funeral this weekend. And I don't know how I'm going to process it. I don't. I'm estranged from my family because they're on the other, they're secular Jewish and very much on that side, a lot of them. And a long time ago, because of my faith and because of my politics and how I chose to live my life, not really so close to them, somewhat, but sort of estranged. So that sort of feels like I'm going into a movie, right? We get back together at the funeral for our sister, and so pray for me. I don't know how things are going to go. But what I do know is I'm in the middle of, putting out this voter guide, and please check out churchvoterguides.org. Take advantage of all the information we have in there to learn about the candidates. We're trying to get out right now, I've been trying the past couple of days, a ballot initiative voter guide, different than everybody else's because we don't give our opinion in there, and get involved and think and do something. And there's going to be life after the election too, so stay in the game for that. And so I'll let you know that on the show today is a friend of mine and someone who's really doing something, putting himself out there, actually wants you to send him to the swamp in Washington, thinking that he can actually do something, and that, of course, is Congressional District 5 candidate for the Republican Party, Jeff Crank. Jeff, thanks so much for being
Hi,
on the Peak.
thank you for being for inviting me and having me on. And I'm sorry to hear about your sister. And
Yeah.
I will pray for you as you process that. It's tough.
Yeah, it is. I haven't had a chance to even really think about it and running in here to the show. But what we're going to be doing on the program today, talking to Jeff, at some point we're going to be getting into the candidacy. And of course, he's here as a candidate. Give him a chance to tell you why you should elect him. But overall, my question is, can we the people get our act together? And Jeff's background is media, like mine. He was on the radio here for 14 years. He currently does a podcast for American for Prosperity. We're media guys, and we look at what's going on. And so over the course of this program, we're going to be talking about what's going on with the media and what can be done about that, and what's going on with the church and what can we do about that, and what in the world is going on with the politics, especially here in our state. And what can we do about that? Because, folks, we have to remember that our founding fathers decided that we're the government, not a king. We collectively are the king. And when the king doesn't have his act together, then the whole nation has no vision. And we're let loose, and we're lawless, and we're in trouble. So I want you to think about doing something, as Jeff and I talked throughout the program today. Find some way to check in and not check out. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to The Peak on The Answer, and we'll be right back with Jeff Crank. Welcome back to The Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1 to The Answer. And we have on the program for the entire hour Jeff Crank, Regional VP of Americans for Prosperity, host of the American Potential podcast, and running, crazy as it is, for Doug Lamborn's seat. Because he is retiring to go and represent us, District 5 U.S. Congress from Colorado, to head to the swamp. So, the media. That's my background, always has been. I have a degree in broadcasting and film. I have a BS degree from a reputable college, Boston University. So I can BS better than the rest of them. And I also understand the BS. And I know where it's coming from, and I know what the media is about, and so does Jeff. We know how decisions are made, we know how it gets manipulated, and we know every day we have to have a gut check of, is that really a story we can tell? You know, is that really fair and balanced? Are we putting ourselves into this too much? Are we, allowing the fact that that person might get upset at us and we might lose a sponsor or whatever, is going on all the time when you're in this business. And you have to be a journalist if you want to really serve the public. You have to understand that it's a sacred right. And I'm angry at the media. I really, really am. There's a famous movie, if you haven't seen it, called Network, won Academy Award in 1976. David Mamet, I believe, wrote it. You should see it if you haven't seen it. And it's all about how the media was bought and paid for and how it's manipulating the whole public. This was back in 76, folks. 50 years ago, this was well known. We haven't done anything about it. In fact, it's gotten worse. And if you don't, I guess you believe me after seeing the debates. I mean, how many debates you have to see where the people who are supposed to be the moderators are partisan and helping one group and not another. But that's happening moment by moment all the time. And the very fact that we need conservative media is just wrong. But is there a liberal media? Like, nobody is out there saying, hey, we're the liberal media station. Why? You know why. Because the mainstream media has become the liberal media. But what is the media supposed to be? Well, actually balanced. It's actually supposed to bring you facts in context. It can't be completely neutral. Facts aren't neutral. We're supposed to help you in context, but we're not supposed to indoctrinate you, and we're supposed to do our best to help you live your life. So, Jeff, are you looking around the media landscape, especially as a candidate, right, who's trying to message out into that, and you would think it would be friendly here in Colorado Springs, where it should be a mostly conservative town, but the media isn't so much. What are you finding out there? What are your impressions, both from, behind the mic and in front of it?
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you, Chaim. I think there's been a collapse of the Fourth Estate, right, in the United States, where people have just almost given up on even caring if they're impartial. Many journalists have, which is really sad, because there's commentators. There are people who are commentators, and that's okay. We have those lots of times, but they play a different role than a journalist, and we just need more people who are journalists. And I think a lot of it started with social media. Once journalists, I mean, who would have ever thought Walter Cronkite would have gotten onto some platform and said what his personal opinion was?
Right.
But, you know, Jake Tapper can't wait to do that. He can't wait to go on X and tweet something out about his personal view. And maybe it makes him a celebrity. That might make him happy, but it's really not good for journalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to say when it's opinion and when it's news.
Right.
Here on this station, there's a mix, absolutely. A lot of it, a lot of the hosts on here, I mean, they talk for hours, the national host, and it's basically all commentary. And we're trying to find that balance here, and we invite you, you know, that's why we're a citizen journalist model. We actually have other people. It's not just us controlling everything. You can come in and tell stories here, so go to thepeak.news and find out more about that. What have you been finding as a political candidate that's been the most, you know, the hardest part of dealing with the media? What have you learned about the media by being a candidate? I guess that's the question.
Well, it is definitely interesting seeing it from that side, and what I've seen particularly this time, which, you know, I ran 18 years ago and I didn't see this as much, so it's really changed, is the driving of the narrative by the media. I had debated my opponent just a couple nights ago, and there was a panel there, and they kept wanting to talk about abortion, and they kept wanting to talk about other issues. Oh, they kept wanting to talk about particularly the issue with the Aurora, and, you know, whether gangs were quote unquote taking over Aurora, and they kept wanting to drive that, and I kept saying, I don't think the American people really, those aren't high issues. Abortion, if you look at a poll right now, abortion is 2 or 3% is what most people think.
As far as affecting the vote?
Affecting the vote. They're voting on the economy and inflation and things like that.
Of course.
But those things advantage Donald Trump. They advantage Republicans running for Congress as issues if you're talking about inflation and immigration. If you're talking about abortion, or you're talking about protecting democracy or whatever, those things help Democrats. Well, if you look at any poll, I mean, I just saw one for Congressional District 8 up in Gabe Evans is running for that in Colorado 8. And it was, 24% said inflation in the economy was most important, 21% said immigration, and like 3% said abortion. So why, when I go into a debate, are they constantly harping on abortion? Because as the media, many times they're trying to change the discussion to that issue, right? And that's why they're bringing it up. If they really wanted to talk about people wanted to talk about, they'd be talking about inflation and the economy.
Wow. So what do you think we can do? I mean, my attempt here with the Peak, to do this citizen journalist model is to say, hey, can we the people, let's do grassroots media. Let's do it. And we're having some success with it. I'm amazed how few people are contacting us. I think so many people don't believe anything is real anymore. Yeah. They've checked out because, I mean, with the couple million people we have in our area, I would think more people would want to tell stories. But we have a group that's wanting to do that, and we hope to grow that. Well, what do you think we can do as the people to push back against this giant media industrial complex that seems to be wanting to drive the narrative 24/7?
Well, I think you're doing it, Chaim. I mean, I think what you're doing is...
You think this is the model for the country?
Well, I think it's this and other things, right? I think it's what you're doing. I think it's, formerly, the last 20 years, it's been talk radio, right? Mm-hmm. That's been the one platform where you could get things out that countered that liberal narrative. So I think that's a piece of it. I think podcasting is a piece of it, right? As podcasting grows in popularity and people have that voice and the ability to do that, I think it's a sort of a threat to the legacy media and the liberal media. So I think there's no one solution, but look, true patriots have to keep that alive. I mean, you're not here to just throw me softballs. I mean, if I did something wrong and you knew about it, if I had an ethical failing or something, it's your job to ask me about it and to try and press me a little.
But you know what I would do? I wouldn't ask you first about it on the air.
Right.
I would come to you because you're my neighbor also and say, hey, buddy, there's an issue here. We got to talk about this. Get prepared to talk. But that's the balance.
Yeah.
It's not weak or gotcha.
You're right.
It's a middle ground of actually respecting each other and doing this together.
Yeah. Yeah, and there may be, maybe you don't know all the facts, right? So maybe you call me and I say, well, Chaim, that's not really what happened. And maybe you go, yeah, you know what? It doesn't even sound like a story.
Right.
But we have that conversation, and it's a respectful one. We just don't have that much anymore. I think the media does try and play gotcha, and worse yet, they play partisan gotcha. It's always trying to drive, it seems like always trying to drive their narrative.
Right, and it used to just be for sensationalism, but it's gone to one side. That actually happened. We had Michael Allen, our DA and running for DA, on yesterday, and he was in the Gazette yesterday morning, and we cleared up the headline because the headline wasn't true. And we explained that on the air and had an opportunity to do that. And I think that's also the power of local journalism. It's really easy to attack people over social media or across the country. But when you're telling stories locally, you have to have relationships with people. And it's really interesting trying to do journalism. It's not easy, but if you're going to get in the business, you better do a good job. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to The Peak. We have Jeff Crank on. When we come back next, what's going on with the church? We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1 The Answer, and we're spending the hour with Jeff Crank, who is Regional VP for Americans for Prosperity, does the American Potential podcast, and of course is a candidate for Congressional District 5, running to represent the El Paso County area, replacing Doug Lamborn, who is retiring. And we are talking in this segment about the church and its really disengagement from the political realm, from the governmental realm, which is really life. Politics should be downstream from life, from culture, and in my opinion, the church as a dominant entity, social entity here in America, should be leading the way, but it's been marginalized, and I've been seeing that in everything that I'm doing. It's been very discouraging, and I'm a Messianic Jew. I'm a Jew in the church, looking back saying, what are you people doing? You got to be more active. But George Barna, and we've been talking about this for the past week, George Barna, the famous Christian pollster, came out with a poll just last week that like 50% of Christians are not even planning to vote. How easy is it to vote right now? People have checked out. So Jeff, as a Christian, what's your perspective on this, and as you go around and seeing the state of the church in our region? Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, sadly I do, and it's really sad when you think about it. I compare what we have in America sometimes to our health. We take it for granted. We take liberty and freedom for granted. I said this at my church on Sunday. We take the fact that we can gather on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Wednesday and praise God in the way that we see fit, or not go to church if that's what a person chooses to do. We totally take that for granted. There are countries around the world where that is forbidden. They're hidden down in basements trying to do it. They hide their Bibles. We are blessed to live in a country that allows us to do it, and we'll only keep the ability to do that if we protect that. And I compare it to your health. You take it for granted. You don't even think about that until you get the call from the doctor who says, hey, we got a problem. That's when you start thinking about your religious liberty, is when it becomes threatened, or your freedom as a freedom of speech, or whatever it is. So we're kind of lazy in that way, and it is disappointing to see churches do that. And I think churches have relegated. We always don't talk religion, don't talk politics. It's the worst thing to say to anyone. I've never told my kids that. I mean, we need to talk about these things. They're the most important things in our lives.
So what do you think we can do? I mean, there's a handful of pastors in town who are known as the political pastors, but most, it seems, I'm so surprised now we have literally life on the ballot. We have this constitutional abortion amendment, and basically the side that's for constitutional abortion has raised millions. 8-10 million.
Right.
And the others, collectively, there's maybe $250,000 on the other side. People aren't giving, people aren't engaged. What do you see the future of the church. I mean, I'm seeing judgment
Yeah.
coming to our country because of this, and it scares me. What do you think can be done?
Yeah, well, I think I think one, we've got to do a better job of messaging, and we've got to get our leaders, our religious leaders, our pastors and others to engage. And I do think it takes the leaders, and we've got some in this community, and I know you've had some on this show before.
Friends of mine,
Yeah, who are out and really on the cutting edge of this. Look, it's simple. I look back, Martin Luther King. And you look at some of the great movements that have happened. Well, I won't even get into Martin Luther King. I'll just say, because that's a little bit longer. Look at Poland and what happened there, and what pushed back against communism. It was religion. It was faith that did that. That's the thing that moves mountains.
Catholic faith.
Catholic faith. Yeah, right. It was. That's what it took to do that. But that's what does good things at every turn in our society is religion and faith.
Yeah, and that there's not moral relativism. This thing of this, people may not like the rigidity of a moral faith that doesn't change. But if you hang out with people whose morality can change all the time, that's really an insecure place to be. So it's like we've become drunk on freedom, drunk on liberty. And as you said, we take it for granted. And we've taken it to the point now where, decide what gender you want to be on any given day. And you realize that may feel like freedom to you, but really for a society, it's a death spiral. It really is. We need the stability of those of faith to step up. So if that's you, step on up. We'll be back with Jeff Crank on The Peak in a moment. Welcome back to The Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. Thank you for joining us here on this Thursday. We're on Monday through Thursday, so this ends our broadcast week. And as we are in election season, you have your ballots. Don't wait to open them. They're enormous. There's a lot of decisions, and it's not so easy, the way the ballot initiatives are written and on and on. So there's a lot of voter guides that are out there. Churchvoterguides.org is the one that I'm involved in. Truth and Liberty does one. I know that Independence Institute, Jeff Hunt does this, and Centennial, and all of this. And we're going to be coming out pretty soon. Jim Miller, Just a Guy, who you hear at the end of the program every day. We're doing Jim Miller's Just a Guide, voter guide. Add a little humor and some straight talk into the ecosystem here in our county. So stay tuned for that. We're editing that up, and that should be out soon. So we are here this hour with Jeff Crank, who is Regional VP for Americans for Prosperity, host of the American Potential podcast, and U.S. Congressional candidate for CD5. And today's show, what am I calling this show? When are we the people going to, what did I say here? Can we the people get our act together? There it is. I don't know. And the three really biggest things to be about is media, because that's our speech, and that's how we're tracking. Faith, that's really, our moral system, our worldview. And then government and politics, which is how we express ourselves as a community with each other. Those are the three. I mean, arts and entertainment is great, and business is a form of that, and all that. But really, it's the media, faith, and government and politics is really our life. It's how we interact with each other. It's how we go about our day. And so Jeff and I are involved in all three of those things all the time. And so we're talking about that on this segment. We're going to be going into the political realm and his opinion about this country and why he's running for office. Jeff, a little bit more about your background so people can get to know you.
Sure. Chaim, I was born and raised in Colorado, and born and raised in Pueblo. Lived here all of my life except for 8 years where I worked in Congress, worked for our congressman from Colorado Springs area, and did defense work for him, worked on the House Armed Services Committee efforts and keeping Fort Carson open, and military family housing for our soldiers and their families and things like that.
So you've sort of had this job.
Well, in a staff way, in a staff way I have. I mean,
well, isn't the staff who does some?
Well, they do. Yeah, they do. Right. But as the member, you get all the slings and arrows of the votes. So I've done that, and then I came back, worked for the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce, got heavily involved in some of the business community efforts here, founded the Colorado chapter of Americans for Prosperity. As you mentioned, spent 14 years doing radio in this community. Was a talk show host. and then founded the podcast for Americans for Prosperity. I've been doing that for the last couple of years. So that's sort of my background. Did I skip over the fact that I ran 18 years ago for Congress as well? I forgot about that part. Yeah, that minor detail.
So you're back, and you ran in some primaries.
I did, and I only lose my mind and run for Congress every 18 years. So just so you know, right.
So what are you saying? There's so many issues, but to you, and especially to represent Colorado from a federal standpoint, what are the biggest issues in your mind that we should be paying attention to, and maybe we're not? We're distracted on other things.
I think, and we talked about this earlier, I think it's not the issues that the media wants us to talk about. It's the issues that we really should talk about. You know,
well, that Americans actually
affects
your day to day, right?
The first one is inflation and the economy. This is the biggest thing, and it's being driven by spending. It's all of the massive federal spending that started really around COVID to try and get America out of COVID. Everybody got free money. It was first under the Trump administration, but then really got accelerated under the Biden administration. We're spending so much more money today, but after COVID ended, we never went back to that pre-COVID spending level. And so that's really exploded the deficit. We're at $35 trillion. We're adding between $1 and $3 trillion a year to that. It's just unsustainable. And it's not going to be very long before our country has to really start making tough decisions. And we're there in a lot of ways. The biggest responsibility of the federal government is national defense, and we are now spending more on servicing the debt than we are on national defense at the federal level. If that's not a concern, you're not paying attention. Right.
Do we know who gets this debt money? Like, who gets the interest on the debt? Where does that money go?
Well, I mean,
do we even know?
Yeah, I mean, sure, bondholders, and some of it goes to China. I mean, China bought a lot of our debt, right? So, but they're buying less debt now than they were before. So, what does that mean?
They don't have much confidence.
Well, they don't have much confidence, and at some point, somebody may not want to buy our debt. Then what do we do?
Yeah.
So. It's game over at some point if we don't get this pulled back. So that's the first one. Second one I would say is immigration. You know, and I don't even say immigration. I say border security, because we've got to get the border fixed before any of this nonsense about what do we do and who gets to stay, who gets to go. All of that stuff we can deal with later. But the American people want the border secured. They want it fixed, and they want it done now.
So, when you're running for office, and what are you mostly coming up against? I mean, in the primaries and in here, what are the challenges that people are coming to you with when you're defending your policies, that you're getting hit on the most?
Well, I mean, there's some people who want government to do everything. Like they want, what are you going to do? I get asked this.
What are you going to do for me?
What are you going to do for me? Jeff, what do you do about housing? Well, housing is predominantly not a federal issue.
No, it should be.
Right.
Private sector.
Right. Yeah, it should be the private sector, and it should, regulation and zoning and stuff should be done here. You don't want your congressman deciding what you should do. But the one thing we can do is cut lower spending, which will lower interest rates on the American people and make housing more affordable. So there are some things we can do. But, I have people all the time coming up and saying, well, love for you to do this, that, or the other. What about banning books? I said, in libraries or schools, the last thing you want is your congressman deciding what should be in a school. So a lot of times I find my role, that's right, I find my role as a candidate for federal office pushing back on people saying federal government's job is not to provide that to you.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the American prosperity question, because obviously they were not backing Trump, they were backing Haley, and you're as a representative, but you're your own person. And so, but you get labeled with them, you work for them. How is that going, and how do you explain that to clear things up about your specific position, not your employer?
Well, I mean, I've been endorsed by Donald Trump, so there's the first thing, right? I've been endorsed by Donald Trump. The primary's over. The president endorsed me, and it's time to move forward as a united Republican Party. And it's pretty simple. Americans for Prosperity did a lot of work with the Trump administration when they were in. They were a grassroots effort trying to get the 3 U.S. Supreme Court nominees that he put forward confirmed through the Senate. They made millions of phone calls, or helped drive millions of phone calls into those Senate offices. They were a major player on getting the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed. that was President Trump's signature tax cut. They helped on right to try, which was medical, allowing people to be able to try things to save their life in the medical field. They helped work with him on VA healthcare through the Mission Act. They did a lot of work with President Trump. They made whatever decision they made in the primary to support someone other than Donald Trump. But look, if the Republican Party wants to move forward and win elections, they got to stop looking backwards. Like it doesn't matter what happened in 2016 or 2020 or in the primary. If Donald Trump wants to win, he needs to get as many votes as he can. And that includes me, by the way. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I've already given him money. I'm doing everything I can to help him. I spoke at his rally. But
In Aurora.
In Aurora, yeah. But he's going to need to get those voters that supported Nikki Haley or supported Ron DeSantis or whoever. That it's time. If we want to win as Republicans, it is time to move on. And people who continue to bring this up, and I'm not saying you, Haim, but if there are people who continue, well, what about this and what about that? All you're doing is dividing the Republican Party and making it harder for Donald Trump to win. I'm running TV ads with Donald Trump in them, saying I am going to go support Donald Trump. I don't know what else I could do to say I'm going to support Donald Trump more than that.
Okay, and actually in the next segment, we're going to talk about our political party is still relevant to the American people because, there's a lot of that mess going on, especially here in El Paso County and in Colorado. So, give you the last couple minutes, for your full-on pitch. Why should people vote for you? Why should El Paso County send you to Washington to represent us?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I'm focused on the things that matter to the voters: inflation, economy, and there's only one way to solve that, and that's to lower spending at the federal level. They stop printing the money, and as soon as we do that, inflation will come down. That's the first thing. Second thing is the border. As I said, we've got to go secure the border. My opponent doesn't really care, frankly, if the border is secured. It couldn't name the other night when I debated, or could not name one thing that she wanted to cut, not one federal program that she wanted to cut. I'm going to go there and make government smaller. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I'd say from a local standpoint, I've been very involved with these 5 military installations with our defense sector here. I'm a good fit for this district, knowing that that I've been involved in helping shape what our community looks like over the last 33 years. And I think that I'll be a good partner in Washington to the community here, to our military, to their families, to our veterans, ready to go there and serve for them in Washington. JeffCrankForCongress.com is the website. I'd love to have people go check it out.
Okay. It's election season, folks, and I'm going to encourage you again, because we the people need to get our act together, and that means you. So find something to do over the next couple of weeks. Talk to your neighbors. Discuss these ballot initiatives. Educate yourself. I want you to vote your values. I don't want you to vote, well, of course I want you to vote like I'm going to vote. Of course I do, but I'm not going to tell you that. I want you to be you, and for us to be able to have civil discussions here. When we come back with Jeff Crank, we're going to be finishing up talking about why are the political parties in such a mess, and are they still relevant? Especially we have this ranked choice voting coming to consider. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Peak News. I'm Chaim Goldman, the Watchman. You're listening to AM 1460 and FM 101.1 The Answer. We're spending the hour with Jeff Crank, congressional candidate for CD5 and a fellow media journalist, talk show host, and so we share a lot of the same, life. We consider a lot of the same things, and politics is a crazy business. It really is, and it's if anything, it has a lot of compromise in it. It's politics. It's unfortunate. I wish we just had government, but what we've been seeing in our state and in our county is a division. There's at least 2 Republican parties. We have our mayor is now ran unaffiliated. The middle, is as big as the 2 different parties. And now we have this ranked choice voting and jungle primary. You should really look into that. What ballot amendment is that? Look into that. If you look into it, it's a confusing mess. I'm not saying the party system is great, but I think we need some more time to consider this and not just, I would say, I know I'm voting against it, but please look into it. But Jeff, I understand that political parties are still important because we have a two-party system and the money and the power is there. But as far as Americans are concerned, do parties matter anymore?
Well, I hope that they matter because, frankly, that's one of the things we use to judge people by, right? That it doesn't tell us everything, but generally, Republicans stand for more free markets and, frankly, more individual rights, and Democrats stand generally for more, frankly, more government control on many things, and collectivism and less individual rights. And I think it's a good thing to have that, so people kind of understand. That's how our system's always worked. I support them. I've been a Republican my entire life. I'm going to continue to always be a Republican. I don't see myself changing that. And by the way, I oppose this ranked choice voting thing too. I think it will be a gigantic mess. It's a gigantic mess in Alaska. They're likely to repeal it this year in Alaska. And I think here's what's going to happen. If it does pass in Colorado, I think that when it shows up and we have to actually vote it and people get their ballot, they are going to say, what in the world is this? I have no idea what this means. They're going to have to change out all the way they tabulate ballots and everything else.
It won't even matter by counties anymore.
No, it's going to be a giant mess. Giant mess.
And so, there's an appeal to it. There's an understanding of an appeal to it. But just like everything, you've got to take the time to educate yourself, at least to the point, folks, where you understand these things enough to decide one way or the other. Don't just go for what feels good. All of these ballot initiatives are written to feel good. But you have to question, why is this on the ballot? What are the people behind it trying to do?
And if you don't understand it, vote no. Because then the current law stays, right?
Stays. At least we get the status quo.
At least you get the status quo.
Because remember, foundationally changing America is an agenda.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a good thing. Conservatives want to conserve the things that brought us here to a good state, not the bad state. So just on this, we have about a minute left. Where do you see, with all of this, going, the party system going, when so many people don't just vote down the party ranks anymore? How has this changed politics?
I think it's changing it dramatically. We see it in Colorado. Obviously, more and more people are unaffiliated because Colorado's law, which I do not agree with, benefits you if you're an unaffiliated voter, right? You get 2 ballots, you get to choose. I don't like that.
Yeah, I think you join the party or you're not
join
in
the party or you're not in the party. I totally agree. Yeah, but look, I think it's going to change.
And by the way, I'm unaffiliated. I'm a leave me alone libertarian, unaffiliated. So I'm out.
Yeah, right. Look, I mean, it's going to change it forever, and I think we need to be very careful in doing that in Colorado. We shouldn't mess with it.
Okay. Final few seconds. Why are you hopeful for this country?
Well, I'm hopeful because like Ronald Reagan, I look at it and I say, hey, you got Democrats telling us we're going to have to sacrifice and use certain kind of energy and this and that, and it's never going to be as good. I don't agree with that. If we get our debt under control, we get our borders under control, America's future is bright.
Okay, well, it's a big if, and it depends on who we have in office here in the state and on the federal level and on the hyper-local level where things really happen. So folks, really open up your ballot, do the research, and vote your values. Jeff Crank, thanks so much for being on the Peak.
Hein, thanks for having me.
And enjoy the last couple weeks of the campaign.
I don't know about enjoy, but thank you.
And now, Jim Miller's Just a Guy and the Peak Rants. Well, that's it for the Peak for this day and this week. I hope that you're enjoying what we do here. We can certainly do it better, and that would be with your help. Please go to thepeak.news. Thepeak.news, that's our website. Check out what we do, and consider being a citizen journalist. We'd love that. A sponsor, we really, really love that. You could be a tech or an intern or maybe a guest. And join us on this wonderful experiment to try to bring real journalism back to our region, and who knows, farther than that, because here at the Peak we say the quiet stuff out loud. Well, again, this is the end of our broadcast week. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Dirk Hobbs is always on with the Southern Colorado Business Forum and Digest, so please tune in for that. On Monday, I'm actually not going to be here, and again, this show has been a tribute to my sister, Laurie Beth, who just passed away today. I'm not going to be here on Monday, but Jason Lupo is going to be co-hosting, and we're going to have a civil discussion on Proposition 129 about the hunting bobcats and lynx, and we have a proponent and an opponent, high level, on this to discuss it. We're going to have a civil discussion. I wish I was here to do it, but Jason will be doing a great job. And then on Tuesday, we're having another civil discussion. I'll be back for this. House District 15 candidate Scott Bottoms on the Republican side and Jeff Livingston on the Democratic side will be talking about the big issues in our areas. Both of them want to replace, both of them are running for the office. Scott is the incumbent. Coming up next is the Larry Elder Show here on The Answer. And check out our podcasts, over 100 podcasts on thepeak.news. The Peak, we say the quiet stuff out loud for such a time as this. And rest in peace, Laurie Beth. I miss you. Shalom, everybody.